In Dr. Laura McNeil. She's a legal analyst and lecturer at Columbia University. So it appears this would be damning testimony, but the defense is calling in the credibility of this witness. What are your thoughts?
You know, it's expected. That's the defense's job. They have to convince the jury that she's not a credible witness, so that very, as you stated so accurately, damning testimony does not hurt Lori Vallow in her efforts to get a non-guilty verdict. And so, although I think the defense did a great job acknowledging before the jury that a lot of her testimony that she did in court was not mentioned in the grand jury, they also made some other good points. If you were so afraid of Lori Vallow, why didn't you call the police? Did you contact church headquarters? And so this is par to the course in a case like this. The question is, who's more believable for the jury, the testimony of Audrey or the defense's attacks on her credibility?
Well, and as I watch this trial play out, Laura, I wonder if there's anyone close to Lori Vallow who still supports her, who is still in her corner. We've yet to see anyone take the stand who fits that bill. We'll see who the defense brings in the case. How does a jury interpret that?
Yeah, I think the jury interprets that as a poor character, someone who has isolated her family and friends, someone who, to be quite frank, is a little over the edge in terms of her ability to kind of separate irrationality from rational thinking. When you continuously hear not only her friends and neighbors, but her own family members, her niece's husband, Ian Pulowski, also talking about her odd behavior, this light and dark ranking system that she does to evaluate whether zombies are in people. The jury is hearing all this, and what message the jury is constantly receiving is Lori Vallow is not stable. Lori Vallow has the propensity to commit murder, even the murder of her own children. And that's what the prosecution is trying to establish.
Right. And to that point, I want to play for people at home part of an interview with my NewsNation colleague, Brian Enton, talking to a former inmate who was incarcerated with Lori Vallow about her mental state. Let's listen.
There was just one time she did sock puppets, and she's probably just super bored. I mean, when she left to northern Idaho for mental illness or whatever they did, they moved me into her pod. So I was in there just right after her, and it's a very small area, and it's lonely.
When you say sock puppets, though, like, what do you mean?
Like she had socks on her hands and would just kind of, like, they'd talk to each other. It's not like she did it all day, but we caught her doing it.
So sock puppets in prison. Her mental competency has always been called into question, but she was deemed competent to stand trial. Will the jury hear any of this?
You know, it'll depend on the judge whether or not he allows any of that information. That particular former inmate would need to be subpoenaed to come in court to give her testimony. But her mental health, whether or not she is fit to stand trial, there's still, to be quite honest, a big question mark. I know that she was deemed fit to stand trial, but I wouldn't be surprised, to be quite honest, as the evidence continues to unfold in this case, if that is challenged again. The level of odd behavior is so disturbing, not only for us as viewers that are watching and the jury members, the judge has to hear this as well. And so I don't think it's beyond the realm of possibility that she might be deemed unfit to continue this trial. Again, this very odd behavior, definitely signs of mental health illness that are very relevant to this trial.
And would that come from an appeal from the defense, or would the judge under any circumstance intervene and say, I don't think she's fit to stand this trial?
Yes, the judge does have the discretionary power to step in and say, I'd like to have her reevaluated. I don't know if she's fit. It can also come from the defense as well. But again, I would not be surprised if the judge does exercise that power before the end of this trial. And
for part of that reason, the death penalty was taken off the table in this case. How does that impact the case, the testimony, and ultimately the jury?
I don't think it's going to impact the jury that much. I think really they're just trying to sort through all of this evidence, which, keep in mind, is circumstantial evidence. The prosecution, as of now, as of the 5th week of the trial, really doesn't have any direct evidence that we've seen to connect Lori to the death of her 2 children. And so they're hearing the circumstantial evidence and just trying to determine if it reaches that bar of reasonable doubt to justify a sentence for life without the possibility of parole. And so so I don't think for the jury that's really going to impact how they evaluate her guilt.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.